Air traffic control versus pilots.
Airfield, Iowa, Mayday, 9815 Lima. I'm in trouble, Mayday.
Coming up. Hey 7-4 crew, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Kelsey. I'm a 747 pilot. My channel, 7-4 Gear, is all about aviation. I want to thank all of you in the 7-4 crew who continue to send in these clips for me. I really appreciate all you so much. If you have a clip that you want to see in this series, either send it to my Instagram or the free form, 74gear.com. Let's get into it.
Listen, Tower 7330 Yankee, downland and down land with uniform.
This is 30 Yankee. You can't come into the Delta airspace unless you're talking to me.
Hey, we were handed off from Sal, and you've been prioritizing people on the ground, so that was our 5th call.
Just the 30 Yankee, I don't get 10 calls if you can't enter the Delta airspace without established communication with the tower.
Roger that, buddy. What would you like us to do now?
Well, I'd like you not to be aggressive in your tone when you've done something wrong and I'm trying to smooth it over. So that's a 30 Yankee. It'd be a good start.
Okay, Johnny. We're downwind midfield, or 30 Yankee.
30 Yankee, turn base, runway 24, clear to land. Wind 2009 or gust 14, altimeter 2988. Have a pin ready when you landed for a phone number.
Roger. 30 Yankee, turn base, runway 24, clear to land.
Something that you may not know unless you're a pilot or an aviation enthusiast is all the airspace in the world is categorized into different categories. In this category for this particular airport, the airspace above it is called Category D. And one of the rules of a Category D airport is that you have to establish two-way communication before you go into their airspace. What that means is if you are the controller, I have to call and say something to you and you have to say something back to me. And despite me looking like Tom Cruise's twin from Top Gun, I'm referring to Top Gun 1, not 2, before you fire off all your mean comments, rules in aviation are not made to be broken. I'm going to make an assumption here that this is a flight instructor and a student. And the instructor told the student, go ahead and enter the airspace and then make this radio call. And then when the controller came back being upset and irritated, then the instructor stepped in. Listen again to what happens.
Listen, Tower 7330 Yankee, downland and down land with uniform.
This is 30 Yankee. You can't come into the Delta airspace unless you're talking to me.
Hey, we were handed off from Sal, and you've been prioritizing people on the ground, so that was our 5th call.
What the pilot is saying here is that the controller is giving priority to the people on the ground and not the people in the air. And he is right. Typically, the pilots in the air get priority over people on the ground. However, he's completely wrong in the way that he's doing it. Just because you aren't satisfied with the way that he's doing it doesn't mean you get to bypass all the rules and just enter the airspace and do whatever you want, especially with that attitude. Now, while the instructor's attitude irritates me to no end, and the controller should have been handling the people in the air and prioritizing them over people on the ground, and I don't have that beginning audio, so I don't know what was happening there. Even though that's what the controller should be doing, the person I feel the most for is the student. As a student, when you're flying, especially as you're new, you have to rely on your instructor because even though there's all these different things that you're learning, if your instructor says, hey, no, this will be fine, just do this and I'll show you how this works, you're just going to say, okay, or at least I would have when I was a new student. If my instructor said, hey, no, we'll just do this thing, it'll be fine, and then we'll do this, I wouldn't know any different. So that's who I really feel the most for is her. Here's why. If this controller ends up violating them, they're both going to have something on their record. Now, in her case, it's going to be easier to explain because she's going to say, oh, I had X amount of time and my instructor told me to do this and so I did and then this is how it all played out, and I would hopefully guess that she would keep that audio in case she goes into an interview and someone was to ask her about it. She could use that as a learning experience and she could say something like, I learned from this experience that even though a captain may outrank me and make the final decision, I should push back more if there's something that doesn't seem right or I don't feel confident about it or something that violates an FAR, one of the rules that we have in aviation. So she can use that and make it a positive. The instructor, on the other hand, is going to have a harder time explaining how this is. I'm guessing he is not going to have the audio for any of the interviews that he does. My guess is the instructor's really hoping in this situation that this audio never gets out and some dickhead on YouTube doesn't put it on his channel. Too late. But the reality is that if I was involved in the hiring process at any airline, which I've never been invited to do, I guess because maybe my Cockpit Confessional series, but I've never been invited to be on any HR, but I would have a hard time hearing this audio or knowing that this pilot had created this situation and think, oh, this person is a whole new person, unless he was just something about him really amazed me or he had some great explanation of how this situation was caused. It would be really hard for me to go, this is not a big deal. Unless it was years down the road and he said, okay, yeah, that happened 10 years ago. I was very immature. I was a new flight instructor, whatever. Then maybe in that situation. But if this was, hey, this was a year ago and now I'm a better person, I would just have a hard time, because this is a very bad attitude to have, to make the decision to openly and knowingly violate these rules and then have a bad attitude with the controller after the fact. That's crazy to me. I've also mentioned before, it's typically never good to be told you have a phone number to copy. And this is exactly what happened here.
Have a pin ready when you landed for a phone number.
That's basically aviation's version of getting told you're going to go to the principal's office when you're in elementary school. And for those of you that never got sent to the principal's office, I can tell you from personal experience, because I got sent multiple times, it's not something that you want to do. However, when I did get sent to the principal's office, I typically was on my best behavior. That doesn't apply to this flight instructor. Listen what happens next.
System 7330 Yankee, 2 right turns or left turns, either way. Stop and advise ready to cop the phone number.
I am taxiing to the north side hangars, 7330 Yankee.
The 30 Yankee, taxi 10 feet forward, stop and advise when ready to copy your phone number, please.
Taxi 10 feet forward, and he will be ready to copy.
As most of you know, I try to give the benefit of the doubt to a lot of people. So when he says this,
I am taxiing to the north side hangars, 7330 Yankee.
there are two possible situations here. One is he's letting the controller know where he's parking at, which is normal. Typically when you land, even when you're at a commercial airport and flying passengers, when you land, a lot of times the controllers want you to tell them where you're parking so they know how to maneuver you on the ground, what direction to send you. So that's one possibility, is that he's landing and he's saying, I'm parking in this area so that way you can give me some direction of where you want me to go. That's one. The other possible way is that he's telling them, hey, I'm just going to the hangars and I'm just disregarding the thing about the phone number. That's the other possible scenario. I'll let you all duke it out in the comments of what you think that he was trying to say. But those are the two possible scenarios. I'm hoping it was the first one. What's going to happen here, as soon as the pilot lands, he's going to go park the plane. Then he's going to call that phone number, or I'm hoping that he calls that phone number. Anytime you call an air traffic control tower, that call is being recorded. So hopefully, before he makes that phone call, he eats some humble pie.
You've been prioritizing people on the ground, so that was our 5th call.
I told you a story a long time ago about when I was flying with this guy, PJ. He was an older Vietnam-era B-52 bomber pilot, great guy. We're still friends to this day, and we messed something up. When they told us to call the tower, we landed. I got all the passengers off the plane. I was flying corporate at the time. And when I came back, I could hear PJ on the phone with the controllers taking 100% responsibility. In fact, almost too much, saying like, I was the one that was handling the radios, the first officer was flying, he had nothing to do with it, that's 100% on me, I was the one that was supposed to call. He was really just taking full responsibility for everything that's going on, and that just shows you what a stand-up guy PJ is. And really a great example of something that you, if you're ever a captain, is something that you should look at, is saying, hey, 100% of the blame is on me, and 100% of the responsibility is on me. However, in aviation, we have something where if you make a mistake, and in this case it was a mistake where PJ forgot to make a call, and I didn't catch it either. If you forget to make that radio call and it was just a genuine mistake, there's a form you can fill out. You can fill out that form and basically confess your sins. Say, hey, we messed this up, we did this and this and this, and then we'll say suggestions of how to prevent that from happening, and this whole form you fill out. And the reason is that the FAA, or whatever governing body of your country, the FAA takes that information and starts to put it all together and compile it and see if there's a trend. Is this thing happening a lot all over the US? What can we do to change it to make aviation more safe? So it's a really cool thing. So by telling on yourself and giving all the facts, it's kind of a get out of jail free card. However, that's on a mistake. That doesn't apply if you intentionally do something wrong. You can't show up like Denzel in Flight, all high and jacked up on cocaine, and then go, oh, and let me just fill out this form here. That's not how it works. It has to be a genuine mistake that you made, and then it's not that you can do whatever you want again and again and again and get out of jail free, but it's basically for those mistakes. So I have had to fill out those forms more than once, but the difference is that I've never had that attitude that this guy's having here, and I've never said something like this on the radio.
Okay, Johnny, we're downwind midfield, or 30 Yankee.
Everybody's human, everybody makes mistakes, but having that bad attitude, that's never a good thing.
Fairfield, Iowa, Mayday, 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 9815 Lima. I'm in trouble, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
November 9815 Lima, Fort Dodge Radio, go ahead.
I have no idea where I'm going. I'm going to crash, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
9815, let me say last known position.
I have no idea, Mayday, 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 I'm going to crash.
9815, let me say altitude.
Holy I'm rolling, I'm rolling, I'm rolling, I'm rolling. Oh my God! Help! Help!
Calling Fort Dodge, release the stick, go forward on the stick, and then slowly back again.
Man, that is just so hard for me to hear, because you can hear the fear that's in his voice as he's making those transmissions. It's just scary knowing that that's a genuine thing that's going on. That's really, really scary to me. Something that you're taught in aviation, and this applies to all pilots in any category, is aviate, navigate, and communicate. Whenever you're in trouble, first thing you do is you fly the plane. The second thing you do is navigate, so you don't do things like fly into a mountain or do something and fly into something that was going to make your situation worse. And then the last thing you do is you communicate. And the reason is because those first two things are going to keep you alive. The last thing is going to help coordinate with air traffic control of what you're doing, keep planes away from you, whatever the situation may be. I talked about it in the Sully Hollywood versus Reality, where he was making communication last priority. The very first priority was aviate, fly the plane, navigate, where are we going to land? So he was prioritizing everything exactly the way that you should be doing it. Now, this pilot is unable to aviate because he's lost, he's spinning or rolling, and he can't navigate because he has no idea where he's at or what's going on, so his last choice was to communicate. What's crazy is that he is probably transmitting this more out of fear because he's freaked out. You're up there, you're in the plane by yourself, you're spinning in clouds or whatever's going on, and so he's communicating. And in that transmission, there was a controller there who was probably a private pilot or maybe a commercial pilot, but there's a controller there who gives him the instructions of let go of the stick or the yoke, the thing that we steer the plane with, let go of that, let the plane go neutral, push forward, and then pull back. And what he's basically doing is giving this guy instructions to let the wings go neutral. Most civilian planes, the planes that you'll see flying around, the little guys, we call them bug smashers, most of those little planes that you see flying around in the sky, when you don't put any inputs on the steering wheel there, when you don't put any inputs in that yoke, the wings are neutral. They don't left, right, up, down. No, they're just neutral. So by letting go of that, the plane is going to just typically, some planes this works, some they don't, but the plane is just going to roll out and wings level. By pushing it down, he makes sure that he starts to pick up airspeed, and then he can level off. That was the controller strategy by telling him to do that. So listen again when the controller steps in here.
Calling Fort Dodge, release the stick, go forward on the stick, and then slowly back again.
There was a study that was done, I believe in the 50s, that said a pilot that's not trained in flying through clouds can get disoriented within 3 minutes, which seems crazy to me. Like in 3 minutes, you get so disoriented that something like this could happen, but that's what they found was the case. Because the only way that you're able to steer your plane is by looking at your instruments, which if you're not trained to do it, you can just get twisted around. Now, I would say that is totally not true, except for the fact that something like this kind of happened to me. When I was a new pilot, I think I had not completed my private yet, but we had to go to an airport and we had to get underneath the clouds. And the flight instructor said, hey, do you want to try to do this? And I was like, yeah, sure, I've been doing everything else. I can do this. I can get beneath the clouds, turn to this heading and go to this altitude, whatever. That was not the case. So we got into these clouds and we got told turn to this heading. And I remember what happened was I got fixated. And what that means is you have your little pack of instruments up there. They call it a 6-pack. And I started looking at one gauge. And I just got fixated on that gauge, which happens to a lot of pilots. And I just started looking at this thing and it started moving. And I was making no inputs because I was like, I don't understand what's happening. Usually when you're flying, you're using what you're looking outside, the horizon and all these different cues, you're using that as a way to help you. Now you use, like when you're walking down the street, you use what you see and you hear and you use all that stuff. So when you take one of them away, you're a little bit in trouble. And that's what happens here. You're not used to not being able to see the horizon. And so by that happening, you can start looking to do a small turn, and then you get deeper into a turn, and then who knows what this guy has done here, but he's gotten himself into a situation where he feels like he's rolling. So listen as he starts saying this part right here. Now in my particular case, if I had tried to do that maneuver, fly through the clouds when I was untrained to do that, I would have been in a lot of trouble because that's not something that you're allowed to do, obviously. But luckily I had a flight instructor with me and he said, oh, he just kind of laughed and took the controls and we got underneath the clouds. As soon as we got underneath the clouds, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm good again. And so I'm really lucky to have had that experience and realized just how hard it can be in real life. And the other thing to know if you're ever going through to become a student pilot and become a commercial pilot, When you wear these things, they have these things called foggles and hoods where they block out like 90% of everything you can see. I know that you're cheating by looking out the side of your glasses or your foggles or whatever it is. I'm just going to tell you this. In my experience, those foggles or hoods which block out what you're looking at and block out your ability to see outside the plane, they work. But I will tell you this, when you're doing it in real life, it is different. I know it seems like, oh, that's crazy, Kels, that's not how it works. When you go from that to real life, it's different. And one of the things that I excelled in the most in flight school, I was bad at a lot of things, but the one thing that I was pretty good at was flying IFR. Once I got into that part of just flying just the instruments, because to me it felt like this is like a video game. So I can play this little video game and fly these crosshairs or do this thing. To me, it was just a video game, and for me, that part was really easy, which is crazy because that's usually the hardest for people, but for me, that was the easiest thing. Now, none of us will ever know exactly what was going on there because A, he was so disoriented, he didn't know what was going on, whether he was in a steep bank or a calm bank or a rolling bank or who knows what was actually going on. And these little planes don't have the voice recorders and the flight data recorders, which is what you see on a commercial airline when there's an accident. That information could be used if this were to happen to a commercial airliner, which would never happen, but in a commercial airliner, if this particular case were to happen, they'd be able to pull that information and see exactly what was going on with the plane. But that is not something, because that's very expensive equipment, that's not something that you would have on a small plane like this. Now you might be wondering at the beginning, why did that controller, why was he asking what your altitude is and where are you and things like that? I'm guessing what happened when he started getting these radio calls, this Mayday call from this guy, he didn't know which plane he was looking at. Is the guy about to go into a mountain? How high is he? Are there planes around him? Is he going to hit another plane? What plane is this that he's talking at? Because he could be looking at a screen of 50 or 100 different planes that are moving around. So he's trying to figure out who is this guy? Where is he? Right? And then the other controller jumped in and told him to release the yoke. And that basically helped to get him out of this spin or stall or whatever was going on. It helped him to get out of that. But that initial call, it might have seemed weird, like, why is the controller asking this? This is so not important. What plane are you? Last known position. But that's what he's trying to do, is figure out what is going on. Who is this guy? Where is he? What's going on? He's trying to be able to figure out which plane this is. He can see altitude changes, but if you're looking at 100 planes and trying to figure out who's in a steep decline, it would be very hard. And he's not going to be able to see this plane in a spin or whatever this guy has gotten himself into.
I'm level. I'm straight level. I don't know who I am.
9815 Lima, remain VFR if you can, remain straight and level. Squawk 7700 if you have a transponder.
Get level now.
9815 Lima, do you have a transponder, sir?
I do. 1200 right now.
9815 Lima, please squawk 7700.
I'm straight level 7700 going up to 3000. I am in complete IFR.
November 15 Lima, try to remain straight and level.
Two things to explain here if you're not familiar with the terms VFR and IFR. VFR basically means you're flying daytime, you can see everything, it's all normal, blue skies, that's VFR. IFR is you're flying in the clouds. And if you're not trained in flying in the clouds, then something like this can happen, which again seems crazy, but it's true. I had it happen to me. The other thing to note here is that this pilot said he was squawking 1200. Listen.
I do. 1200 right now.
1200 is the code that you transmit when you're flying during clear skies, when you're flying around just normal. So if you just, let's say I went up for a little flight and we're just flying around, like the video that I did with Stella, we're out just flying around, that you'd be squawking 1200. So again, on this controller screen, he's looking and there could be 50 or 60 planes that are squawking 1200. He can't figure out who this guy is. So he says squawk 7700. 7700 is an emergency code. I have a major problem, life-threatening, which definitely for this pilot situation was life-threatening. He's squawking, saying squawk 7700, and what's going to happen now is on that controller screen, he's going to get an alert for that guy. It's going to change colors or bleep or who knows what they got going on over there, but it's going to do something that's going to let him know, like, hey, this is a priority aircraft, and so he's going to be able to focus and give that pilot all the attention that he needs. He's saying fly straight and level and try to get out of the clouds by saying VFR. Now, he's not saying turn, he's just saying get out of the clouds if you can, because he knows how disoriented it can be for a pilot that's not trained in that situation, which this pilot obviously isn't. So he's saying keep your wings level. By keeping your wings level, eventually, as you know, they're going to get out of the clouds. So that's what he's saying. I made a TikTok video a while back where I was explaining all the different codes, but that 7700 code is something that you would only use in an emergency. It's not something you should ever transmit, so don't do that unless you have a real emergency or you're getting told to do it, like in this situation here. This controller, without a doubt, jumped in and saved this guy's life, and I'm sure he knows it. The thing is like I've always said, these controllers are there to really help you out. I'm guessing this controller has some level of private pilot, commercial pilot, or something like that, and was able to remain calm in a situation like that. It sounds like, oh, I would do that, but when you get that call, that Mayday call, or something happens like that, it's going to take you a second to process. So this controller did a great job jumping in here and just saying, let the wings go neutral. And that's actually something I got taught when I was flying early, when I was working on my private. I was talking with this guy who had maybe 1,000 hours, which at that time to me seemed like, oh my gosh, 1,000 hours. I had like 20. And he said, if you ever get jammed up, just let go of the yoke. By letting go of the yoke, which this guy's obviously creating a situation that's bad for him, by letting go of the yoke, it's going to let those wings go level, and then he's going to be able to not be in this spin or whatever steep bank or whatever he's in. Now, as we do for every air traffic control versus pilots, time for the funny one.
845, there's traffic behind you waiting to depart. If you're not ready, I'm going to bring you onto the runway to vacate up 34.
Okay, just as a point of order, we'll just wait for the cabin to be ready. It takes about 2 minutes from the time that it's all general.
Okay, you need to enter runway 28, please. Turn right onto runway 34 to vacate.
Stand by for 845.
Bird 845, proceed onto runway 28 now and vacate right onto runway 34. There is traffic behind you waiting to depart.
Yeah, I've just got a phone call, someone. That's Bird 845, we are actually fully ready.
Seabird 845, line up runway 28 and wait.
I'm on runway 28, Bird 845.
And for future reference, Seabird 845, I suggest you advise the ground controller that you're unable to take departure yet, and you shouldn't really be taxiing out to Echo 1 when you're not ready for departure, because there is traffic behind waiting that is ready.
Stand by.
Seabird 845, are you fully ready for departure?
Bird 845, we just do the checks whilst you keep talking about this. Stand by.
Okay, negative. Turn right, please, onto runway 34. That's the third time I've asked you to vacate onto runway 34. If you're not ready, turn right onto runway 34.
Madam, we are fully ready. We're just trying to complete the checklist with just interrupting our checks. Stand by.
Negative. Turn right onto runway 34. I've asked you 3 times now. Turn right to vacate onto runway 34.
This is the most English exchange ever that you'll ever hear on the radio, and I realize this controller's Irish and that they're in Dublin, but this pilot obviously is English. It's just so funny to me the way he's doing this, and I don't normally explain the funny ones, but take a look at this map. So this is the map of the airport. We call it a chart, but this is the map that has the layout of the whole airport here. Obviously the pilot isn't ready to go. They're supposed to be taking off from this runway. And so what the controller's trying to do is get them to go onto this runway so the pilot behind them can take off. Now there were stages in my career where I was trying to build flight time. So in this particular case, if the controller would have said, go to the back of the line, I would have been like, yes. But the reality is once you become an airline pilot, you just want to get up in the air and get on with your day and get to the destination. You want to get people to where they're going, and you want to get where you're going. Get off the plane, go to the hotel. But it's just funny because this pilot is doing it in the most English way possible. Just keeps delaying just a couple of seconds, and this Irish controller is having none of it. Now they're doing it pretty polite. If you want to see someone when JFK dealing with British Airways that is not nearly as polite, check out this video. And if you want to see something else pretty funny, watch this video up here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.